Hi everyone, welcome to Appliance Advisers. I'm Francesco, joined as always by my co-host Dennis. Today we're going to tackle a really common question we get, and that is, why doesn't my Bosch dishwasher dry? So a lot of times, I handle these with customers. Today I'm going to let you tackle this complaint, Dennis. Why isn't my Bosch dishwasher drying?
Yeah. We get it a lot. And honestly, when I hear that, immediately the first thing I think of is these dishwashers, and Bosch being the most dominant brand sold in this European segment of dishwashers. We would say that it was human error, okay? But that's maybe a strong word. I think it's human understanding of how they actually work. And many times when you're buying them, that's not so easily explained, or it's not explained at the buying time. So you just don't know how to use it. You're using it more like maybe your old GE or your old KitchenAid or Hobart or something that you had in the space. So let's talk about how these things work, and that's really critical. So we've talked in other episodes about what makes a European dishwasher unique is classically American dishwashers took that hot water from your house, whatever your home would give it just when you turn on the faucet, as hot as it could go. And it would compensate drying by having an electric element. If you open it up and look inside, more often than not, you'll see it. It looks just like a baking element in an oven. And that is turned on high, very inefficient, but it was baking the dishes dry. It did a good job, but it was inefficient.
That's also why you would say sometimes, like, you put plastics on the bottom, those plastics would melt a lot of times because of that heating element that's right there.
In my past, So now what happens is they get this great new Bosch. They've heard great things. It's quiet. It's efficient. Why doesn't it dry? So let's get into it. So the first thing I want you to know is this does it differently. It doesn't have a heating element to heat the air. What it does is it takes your hot water from your home and it boosts it with a hot water boosting element that heats that water all the way up to 163 degrees, roughly 30 plus degrees hotter than an American. But it relies on trapping that hot energy it creates by boosting the water to dry. And it uses quote unquote condensation. Now it all sounds fancy, but it's quite simple. But the main thing people need to realize are a few habits have to be used. So when someone says it doesn't work, the first thing I say is, are you leaving the door closed? And normally someone will say, well, I do. I say, well, I'm not asking necessarily you. Does everyone in your home leave it closed? Well, I think they do. And more often than not, older Bosch in years past were so quiet, which is why people wanted them, but it had no indicator to let you know when it's done washing or drying and when to open the door. Now, Fran, do you know this? Dishwashers today take roughly 2 hours to wash and dry dishwashers in a normal full wash. Well, what do we know about Americans? They're impatient. So what does that look like? Couple of things. Well, the first thing it might look like is it done yet? Is it done yet? How about now? Are they dry? Are they dry? And every time they're doing that and opening that dishwasher, that hot air we talked about it produces is escaping. It doesn't replace it. Unlike the American that had that heating element constantly running, it will not replace the air. So drying is going to be hampered. Number two is a lot of times you have someone in the house that just has to throw that extra silverware they found. The dishwasher's doing its thing and they're like, oh, I got a spoon. And they run over and they open it up and they stick it in there. Again, what do? Release that hot air and energy, not gonna dry as well. That's number one. So number one takeaway is leave that door closed, let it do its thing. They all today have some type of indicator, normally a white or a red laser pointer on, if you will, on the ground, letting it know to dry. What's another one you might tell them?
So just in general too, there's a lot of features and programs that are built into these dishwashers today too. There's auto, there's heavy, there's speed wash. So the one thing to know is, to really get the best dry, you really need to use one of those full cycles. An auto cycle, most times is going to be perfectly fine for those. But when you see kind of like on a Bosch, it has a speed 60 cycle, for example, just know that speed 60 is wash only. That is not drying in that 60 minutes. That is a wash only, so the dishes will absolutely still be wet then. So make sure you're aware of kind of what cycles you're using. We talked about the condensation in the European dishwashers that kind of get that water hot to help dry the dishes. Some of the Bosches too, look, they have different features as far as how they dry. So some models actually have an auto open feature. So what happens, certainly like you said, you want to keep the door closed the entire time it's washing and drying. But when it's done with that cycle, it will help to open the door just slightly to release some of that steam, release some of that condensation, and get some fresh air in there to help drying the dishes. Also, there's some models that use what they call CrystalDry. And that's actually a natural element that heats up with the hot water, the heat of the dishwasher, that actually releases some heat into the dishwasher. Kind of like a heated dry, but it's completely natural and doesn't use any energy and does a really good job there. And one other tip I always give to people. So sometimes you do all these things and maybe the dishes are still coming out a little bit wet. And maybe it's the water that you have, and maybe it's the well water or something like that, and your water takes some time to heat up. You can use a sanitized cycle in these dishwashers. That sanitized cycle will actually get the water just a little bit hotter, and that hot water will actually help with that condensation dry to create more steam and to dry a little bit better. Not to say that you need to use that all the time, but certainly something to try if you've tried everything else and you're still always wet.
Yeah, you might notice that in the winter. You know, just think about common things. You turn your shower on. How long does it take for that water to heat up? If you're still there 5-6 minutes longer, well, then maybe you need to help your dishwasher by leaving that on. And that would be the same for an American or European dishwasher, really. Second to that, I'm going to tell you, we talked about a cycle called auto. We talked about a cycle normal wash. We'll get into cycles in another chapter. The big one was the speed 60, or if you have a machine that has a quick wash. Again, Americans are impatient. They want to just go. Their complaint will be, well, I put it on speed and a 30-second cycle. I found a machine, but it just doesn't dry. Exactly, because it's just not turning on the dry mechanism. So to know that. The second thing would be if we open the machine for a second, I always ask that same customer. Remember, we're going down the aisle here. I'm saying, hey, you're using a normal wash. You don't have any of the economy cycles on. You don't have any of the speed cycles on. You have a normal cycle set. You're leaving that door closed. No one's accessing it once you start it. You sure? Okay, good. After that, we're going to say rinse aid. So now what rinse aid is, and normally when I ask people, they say, what's rinse aid? Well, they say, I think I do. And I always say, now, are you sure it's in? If I went to your house right now, would it be in there? I don't know. Okay. Think about what it is. We know that the energy restrictions from the government have gotten tighter and tighter. So machines have to do more with less energy, less water. And how we're going to do that is by using a rinse aid. Now, some people say they're afraid of chemicals and this and that. And there's 7th generation, there's organic materials out there, but basically think of it as Rain-X or wax on a car. It's helping to sheet the water off the plates and dishes that are in there and the silverware, and that's going to aid in the drying, okay? So what you're going to look for there, not a hard thing to do. There's liquid, a lot of them are jet dry, there's various brands out there, finish, and you'd literally take that liquid and you'd fill this thing and fill it and fill it and fill it, and normally it's 3/4 of a bottle roughly, until that machine really bubbles up and it'll take no more, okay? Then we're going to just close it, put our regular detergent in as we would, and we're going to wash, and you're going to wash, and you're going to wash. And when you'd know, up here on every machine, there's some type of indicator, a beeping beacon or something that'll let you know, hey, we're running low. Time to refill it. So if you haven't done it, or you never did it, that's number 2. You need to do that, okay? The other thing some people ask me is, well, I'm going to get an all-in-one detergent. This is a gel pod that has power scrubber, detergent, a rinse aid. Some of them work quite well. We generally recommend the brand Finish. Certainly right on a Bosch, it'll have the big decal for Finish. There's a bunch of reasons why, but it seems we don't sell Finish. So there's nothing for us in it, but it actually is a really good detergent. But those gel packs, some of those packs can work quite well. But either way, you want to address the rinse aid factor, leave that door closed, put it on a normal wash, shut it, and it will dry. I've owned Bosch dishwashers. I'll tell you, it's probably one of my best drying dishwashers I've ever owned. And I've owned a bunch of brands, but it's really more into user error. The final thing that I would just say to you is make sure that whatever you do, understand that plastics are just never going to dry. We know personally, or do it by hand even. Just taking a towel and trying to dry a plastic is really hard. It's hard to get it completely dry. So plastic. So where we get a lot of those complaints, people that use a lot of Tupperware, maybe bring them to work. Parents or folks that are in kids land, they have little kids and use a lot of plastics. I get it. But those times will pass, and that's kind of sad when it does. Sometimes you wish you had the plastics back, but know that if you're doing all those things and you're putting it on a normal wash, you really should be quite happy ultimately with the dry. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the rinse aid is probably one of the most critical things for a dishwasher. Any dishwasher period really needs that rinse aid with just how efficient they are today. And one last tip from me too, on those plastics, and sometimes, you have those kind of bowls or random pieces there that kind of have a little dip on the top that's sitting on that top rack. So the water tends to pool there. A lot of dishwashers and most Bosches too, you're able to adjust that top rack and you can actually tilt it just a little bit. And if you do that, it helps some of that water kind of drain off a little bit. And that might help with some of the drying as well in that kind of in that kind of second rack there too. So just another tip there. These things we've talked about, leaving the door closed, adding rinse aid, doing a normal wash, certainly will make a difference in a Bosch. but it will go for all Europeans and really all dishwashers.
Yeah.
Your KitchenAid doesn't dry the way it used to. It still needs all that help. You want to leave the door closed, add the rinse aid. So it's as much a lot of times us understanding how to use it. And if you do that, I think you're going to find you have a pretty good dishwasher that's drying quite well, and you might be able to eliminate a service call.
Well, hopefully we at least answered that question a little bit for you of why doesn't your Bosch dishwasher dry? So hopefully now it dries a little bit better if you were having that problem.
And don't forget to follow us on social media for appliance tips and updates from Yale Appliance.
Your feedback is what shapes our series. Like what you saw, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you.
Stay informed and inspired on all your appliance needs. This is Appliance Advisors signing off.